My name is Maurice Nyambe. I'm Executive Director at Transparency International Zambia. Transparency International Zambia is a civil society organization that was established way back in the year 2000. So basically last year we were celebrating our 20th anniversary, 20th year of operation in Zambia. Now the way that it is structured is that TIZ is basically the local chapter of a global movement which is called Transparency International. So we have a global movement called Transparency International whose mandate and mission is to fight corruption as well as to advocate for the promotion of good governance at different levels of society. So that global movement has got what are called chapters or branches in some other respects across all parts of the world in over 100 countries across the world. So TIZ is the local chapter or the Zambia chapter of that global movement. Now in terms of our mandate as TIZ, of course we draw our mandate from the international organization, and in that sense we have also adopted the mission of being anti-corruption activists. So we fight against corruption but also advocate for the promotion of good governance at different levels of Zambian society. So our mission specifically as TIZ is that we want to see a Zambia that is anchored on citizens and institutions of integrity. And in doing that, we've got a number of programs that we focus on that help us in terms of being able to achieve our mission. Maybe just very quickly to mention three of them. We have what we call the People Engagement and Advocacy Program.
For the People Engagement Program, we basically focus on three crucial components. The first one is people engagement, which basically is about capacitating citizens to understand their rights around public service provision, as well as capacitate them in terms of engagement with duty bearers.
In terms of the 2021 advocacy strategy, TIZ has got two broad strategies. First of all, there's an outward-looking strategy where we are trying to reach out. The strategy we are using this year is Corruption is Not Zambian. We're using this to reach out to the youths, reach out to different groupings of people. One of the activities we've implemented this year is what we call the Youth Aerobics Mania. So this activity was targeting young people with a different voice or tune to it, because most of the times when you think of an anti-corruption watchdog institution, you not think of us getting involved in any sporting activities. But this is what we did this year because we know that that is very important for advocacy work. So we reached out to about 1,000 youths through that activity. With respect to our outward-looking advocacy strategy. We also have an inward-looking advocacy strategy, which we have termed We Don't Just Talk. This is important because if you know anything about Transparency International Zambia, most people will tell you that we talk about corruption, what is happening in the corruption landscape. But the truth of the matter is, I think what you learn from the other people who have already spoken is the fact that we have a lot of program interventions. So we don't just talk, we implement a lot of interventions which are meant at changing the actual landscape. For example, we make a lot of submissions to Parliament to make sure that laws are amended to suit the advocacy work that we are doing. We want to make sure that laws are amended in order to support the interventions against anti-corruption work. So we want to, with respect to our submissions we make to Parliament, to make sure that even key stakeholders, in terms of their work together with us, the legal framework is supportive for us to fight corruption. So all those things are done with respect to that. So also TIZ is very much interested in showcasing the programs that we have so as to make sure that we are not going to only focus on the things that we say, because we issue out a lot of statements, obviously, even with respect to elections, with respect to anti-corruption. But that is important because we are a watchdog institution. But the focus of our second advocacy branch, which is inward-looking, is to make sure that people know that there are even programs which are running which are meant to effect change.
The second program that we have is what we call our democratic governance program. Now, our democratic governance program is where we have interaction with different institutions of governance. So right now we have collaborations, for example, with government institutions such as the Anti-Corruption Commission, the judiciary, the Zambia Police Service. And the idea behind the democratic governance program is that we are trying to advocate for institutional change. So change of policies as well as change in legislation that is going to help us as a country to become more effective even in terms of our anti-corruption efforts. So that is what we do under democratic governance. We have a third program that we call environment and natural resource governance.
Under environment and natural resource governance, there are 4 focus areas. One is around land administration. And what we are trying to do is to promote transparency, accountability, and integrity in the administration of land. But also there is a component of promoting increased women access to land, particularly in areas that are heavily affected by traditional practices where women are not allowed to own land. And so we're trying to challenge that and see how we can promote equitable, transparent, accountable, and integrity in land administration. The second component is around extractive sector, where we particularly focus on mining licenses award processes, and our focus is how transparent, how accountable is this process in the mining value chain. So we focus on the first level of the value chain, which is awarding of mining licenses, because when a mistake is made at the first level, I think it affects all the other stages in the mining value chain. So some of the things we are promoting, accountability around the implementation of environmental impact mitigation plans, but also to promote free, prior, and informed consent, particularly for mining host communities, so that they are aware they are part and parcel of the processes of awarding mining licenses. The other component around environment and natural resource governance is around reduced emission, deforestation, and degradation, which is called RED+. And the focus is to try and create platforms that facilitate dialogue between service providers and the community in terms of benefit sharing. You may be aware that there is a mechanism that awards communities that sustainably manage their forests, and they are paid for that. So what we try to do is to bring together the two sides, service providers as well as citizens, to try and see how transparent this process is going, how accountable the mechanism is. The last component which we focus on is water integrity. Again, the issue here is around promoting integrity in the management of water resources across the country. We haven't done much on this one, but this is another sub-pillar that drives the environment and natural resource governance program.
Basically, these are the 3 outward focus programs that we have. We also have 2 programs, but these 2 additional programs are focusing more internally in terms of what systems we have in place internally, both in terms of administration, human resource, and all the rest of it. But those are the 5 major programs that we have. And through this, we've been able to do quite a number of interventions over the years across the 5 programs that we work in. And we have had some different levels of success in relation to each of those program areas. So in terms of the collaborations that we have, we do collaborate with quite a number of entities. And I think the importance of collaboration really lies in the fact that even when you look at the anti-corruption work, for example, when you look at just the aspect of fighting corruption itself, I don't think that the fight against corruption will succeed if you leave it only to specific organizations or specific entities. So it's not really just about what TIZ is doing or just about what the Anti-Corruption Commission is doing, for example. The fight against corruption has to take the concerted efforts of different stakeholders that come together, bringing their capacities, their abilities, their energies and their strengths to be able to tackle a problem that threatens to actually spiral out of control. So in that sense, we do collaborate with quite a number of different entities within society. The first collaboration, of course, is with fellow civil society organizations such as ourselves. So we do have some good working collaborations with a lot of civil society organizations in Zambia, some even outside Zambia. But beyond that, we also do have some collaboration with government institutions and entities, such as the Anti-Corruption Commission, for example, the Zambia Police Service. We actually have a running memorandum of understanding with the Zambia Police Service. We also collaborate with institutions such as the Office of the Public Protector, the Judiciary, for example, the Road Traffic and Safety Agency. So all these entities are entities that we actually engage with and interact with in different respects. Another collaboration that we have is we do have collaboration with the media as well, because the media are a critical component even when it comes to the fight against corruption. So they are a very important stakeholder that we do collaborate with as well. Interestingly, we also do have some collaboration with political parties, but I need to mention that as TIZ, we are non-political in terms of our work. As a matter of fact, one of our core values is that we are non-political in nature. But despite that being the case, we do collaborate with political parties in the context of a specific project that we are running that is looking at how we can enhance political integrity within our political parties. So we do work with political parties in that context.
Networking and stakeholder engagement. Through our elections project, we will continue collaborating with key stakeholders in the electoral processes, including political parties, other civil society organizations, the Swedish International Development Agency, SIDA, and the other cooperating partners involved in the electoral process, government departments such as law enforcement agencies and the Electoral Commission of Zambia, as well as communities. This will be done through attending joint electoral process interventions, bilateral engagement meetings, and community meetings.
We've tried to be a little bit strategic in the way we respond to the 2021 general elections. And there are two components that we are dealing with. One, the first component is to have interventions that focus on the long-term electoral process activities. And so what we are doing is we are engaging political parties, we are monitoring build-up activities towards the 2021 elections, we are monitoring campaigns, and our focus area in this monitoring is around electoral corruption and other electoral malpractices, and putting those together and running with them. The second component under the project is short-term monitoring, which will happen on the polling day. And of course, the two main drivers will be one, polling observations, and we'll be observing the casting of votes in various polling stations, but also we'll focus on parallel vote tabulation as a way of securing the vote, but also as a way of informing the general populace about how the elections are going. So in a nutshell, that is our focus as an organization. And I must say that we are excited with the progress we are making so far. And we think that with this progress, we are on solid ground.
And so all these collaborations really have given us different levels of success in terms of some of the results that we've been able to achieve. So maybe just to highlight one or two that already spring to mind. Our collaboration with the Zambia Police Service, for example, has given rise to the development and rolling out of internal policies for the Zambia Police Service that are looking to enhance aspects of transparency and accountability in the way that the Zambia Police Service operates. And so last year in November, we were launching the whistleblower policy as well as the gifts policy for the Zambia Police Service. So the idea is that these are tools, internal tools that are going to help the Zambia Police Service to enhance aspects of accountability, integrity, and transparency in their operations. Another result that we've been able to score from this collaboration is, for example, the service charters that have been developed for the judiciary. So we have developed service charters for different courts within the judicial system. So you're talking about the Court of Appeals, for example. You're talking about the High Court, as well as the Constitutional and Supreme Court. So we have developed service charters that lay out the services that citizens are supposed to enjoy from these entities. And again, all that is in the, in the interest of promoting openness, promoting accountability, and promoting transparency within how these entities operate. Another very good collaboration that I can mention and whose results we are actually very proud of is that we do conduct a joint study every other year together with the Anti-Corruption Commission. Now, this study is called the Zambia Bribe Payers Index. So basically, this is a study that looks at the potential or the extent to which different entities actually receive bribes, or the extent to which people pay bribes to different public entities within Zambia. And it always, elicits very, very interesting results, some of which we have used to actually feed into, new strategies and new areas of work that we are working in. So those are some of the examples of the different results that we've been able to score from the different collaborations that we have with all these different entities. In terms of challenges, well, of course, this sort of work is not devoid of any challenges, and certainly when it comes to a civil society organization such as TIZ, we do face quite a number of challenges. The first of which is just the nature of our work. Okay, so we are a civil society organization that focuses on governance issues, and governance issues are not issues that are very popular when it comes to even, for example, the ruling party or the the government of the day. You have other civil society organizations that are service-oriented in nature. In other words, they focus on things like, sinking boreholes or building schools or building clinics. And for the most part, what we have discovered is that the government tends to be very friendly and very receptive to those type of CSOs, because maybe they are doing things that are going to on which the government can ride and claim some level of success. But when it comes to CSOs that raise issues of transparency, raise issues of accountability, raise issues with the fact that we are seeing misuse of public resources from the Auditor General's reports, for example, then the government is a bit averse to such organizations. And so that alone gives us a very difficult context in which we work. And it's a context that is very dynamic, that is very fluid, that changes in terms of the parameters. And so being able to be flexible enough to react to the changing context, I think, is one of the biggest challenges that we face as civil society organizations that work in this sector. But beyond that, I think there are some obvious issues as well. Things like, for example, when we're talking about the civic space that is available, or the space that is available for there to be divergent views within this context, the context of Zambia, so to speak, I don't think that is a space that is very open. It certainly is a space that is becoming a lot more restrictive. So you have a government that is not very open to criticism, so to speak, or is not very open to people that have divergent views. I think a few months ago, you remember the issue of the youths in Lusaka who wanted to protest about something in particular, about a lot of issues that they thought were going wrong in terms of our governance. And the police used the Public Order Act to deny them the authority or the permission to be able to express that dissent. And they ended up going in the bush to go and have their protest. So those are examples that show that you know, the space that we have to be able to engage and to interact with our leaders and with government entities is becoming a lot more restrictive, and that is a very big challenge. Connected to this, you have the issue also of the NGO Act, which is currently under review because of you know, the concerns that a lot of us civil society organizations raised about that piece of legislation. So it looks like we have a government that is trying to put in place different measures and tools that are going to curtail the voice of civil society, and that alone, I think, is a big challenge. That makes it a lot more difficult for us to even do our work. The other challenges, of course, are obvious things such as, you know, the reducing. You know, reducing access to resources, for example. So donor funding is generally reducing to less developed countries, and the situation with the COVID pandemic has not helped things much because you've got countries in the West that are also, you know, dealing with their own problems related to COVID, and so the aspect of giving aid to less developed countries is becoming less and less. So access to resources is obviously an issue, but also another issue is when it comes to civil society, there's always this criticism that we get largely from government entities that we do not speak with one voice, okay? So you've got a fragmented civil society, you've got one organization here talking about one thing, then the other organization will have a different point of view over the same thing. So it's that lack of cohesion in terms of being able to stand on similar issues. So those are some of the challenges that we've had to grapple with. But maybe one more thing that I need to mention in relation to our work, which is the fight against corruption. I think the biggest challenge that we face is that we seem to have lack of political will, real political will, when it comes to the fight against corruption. So when you look at some of the statements that have been made by, you know, government officials, you will realize that there's a lot that is said in terms of commitment to fight corruption. So we get a lot of what I call rhetoric or verbal rhetoric, where people are just saying the right things, but when push comes to shove and it's time to actually put action to your words, we don't tend to see that action being made. So the lack of serious political will to be able to fight corruption, I think, has made our work a lot more difficult. But also in the same vein, it has given us greater resolve to succeed on this path, because it shows us that we are actually going in the right direction in that sense. Obviously, over the last 20 or 21 years now, we're in our 21st year of operation. Over the last 21 years that we have been in existence, there's a lot of lessons that we have learned. Some of these lessons are tied to some of the challenges and successes that I have shared. But in terms of maybe some of the key ones that I would probably highlight, I think the first one is that for you to succeed even as a civil society organization, particularly one that is working in the area of governance, I think it's important for you to remain resolute in terms of your mandate, because it's very easy for you to be thrown around, particularly because of the dynamic nature of the context that we work in. Because the context that we work in is such that there are always issues that are coming up. So today you may be required to talk about this one thing. Before you even finish talking about this, there's already another issue that has come up. So it's important for you to be able to stay focused in terms of your mandate, because otherwise you'll find yourself running in all sorts of direction, and that is not going to bode well, even for the sort of work that you do. But also another lesson that we have learned related to the issue of focus, maybe this just exemplifies the issue of focus, is that for the most part you have had civil society organizations that put their mandate aside and rather follow the money, so to speak. So you've got donors that will give money for all sorts of things. Sometimes donors will come to you and say, you know, we've got this pot of money and we want you to talk about this particular issue. But then that particular issue, you realize that it's not actually in line with your mandate. It's not in line with your goal or your mission or your vision. But we have had cases where civil society organizations have really just accepted the money and then attempt to sort of integrate whatever it is into their work, which doesn't always work. So I think the lesson is that we should stick to our mandate as civil society organization, regardless of what is out there, regardless of what money is available. Beyond that, another lesson, of course, is the power of collaboration. I always say that it's important to be able to have coalitions of some sort when it comes to the specific issues that you are working on. So, for example, we work on anti-corruption or on the issue of corruption. Now, there are other civil society organizations that also address aspects of corruption. So the cohesion and collaboration and coming together between all these different entities, I think is something that we have learned does yield very positive results in that sense. It also touches on the issue of the fragmentation that we have seen from civil society organizations. So there is every value to be gained from working in collaboration with other entities rather than going it alone. When it comes to issues of advocacy, it also goes with numbers. So it's a bit like politics. You always hear that politics is about numbers. Well, even advocacy work is also about numbers. So the more you are, the bigger or the greater your punch is going to be. So I think these are two of the most critical lessons that we have learned. But the third one, which I think is another key one, is that when it comes to the sort of work that we do, the advocacy work that we do, it's always important to be able to carry the masses or to carry the citizens along, because it is very easy for this sort of work to become very elitist. So it can easily become work that just happens at a national or higher level without really carrying the base on which it is actually anchored. So it's important that whatever we do in terms of even when we're doing advocacy against corruption, for example, just to give you a practical example, it is one thing to start making noise about maybe some money that has been misused or some resources that have been misused in some ministry somewhere. And you can already begin to make statements to the effect that, let's say maybe 100 million kwacha has been misused by this entity, and then you raise all the noise that you raise about it. But then the villager who's back in Kaputa or in Shangombo or wherever, they're not going to be able to relate to to that issue, because it seems very superfluous to them. It seems so far-fetched to them. Even when you look at the issue of the honeybee pharmacy, for example, the fact that there was a $17 million contract that was given to a company that was not in existence at the time. If you go with that message to the grassroots, they may not really be able to relate what $17 million looks like. And so we need to get to a point where we begin to get these bigger issues and begin to break them down into smaller issues that even people at the grassroots will be able to understand. So if you're talking about a misuse of $2 million, for example, fire tenders, okay? You can go with an approach that says, okay, out of this $2 million would have actually bought you X number of desks in your local school, or it would have bought you X number of medical supplies in your local health center. So when you begin to bring down the issues to that level, you begin to relate them to the everyday struggles and everyday livelihood concerns of the people on the ground. Then it becomes easier for them to be able to relate to these bigger issues. And that is how you demystify the bigger issues that you are dealing with in your advocacy approach, and you bring them down to a level where they are able to be understood at that level. So these are some of the lessons that we have learned. And of course, we continue to learn lessons from the work that we do, because the work that we do is always evolving. Like I said, the context is a fluid one that constantly changes, and so the learning also is evolving, and we keep learning the lessons even as we go on with our work.